17th of March 2026, the United States dropped 5,000-pound bombs on the Iranian coastline. Not on nuclear facilities, not on missile factories inside the country, on the coast, the specific stretch of Iranian shore that overlooks the most important 21 miles of ocean on Earth, the Strait of Hormuz. And those bombs, GBU, 7.2 deep penetrator munitions, the heaviest conventional weapon in America's arsenal, didn't close the strait. They didn't reopen it either. 20% of the world's daily oil supply is still sitting on the wrong side of a blockade that no one in Washington predicted, no one in Beijing fully controls, and no one in Tehran is ready to end. This isn't a shipping dispute. This is the first time in modern history that a nation has used the world's most critical oil choke point as a weapon of selective war. And the rules of who passes and who burns, those rules are being written in real time. Here's what nobody is connecting. Let's start with the numbers, because the numbers tell the story before the politics do. Before February 28th, 100 to 135 ships crossed the Strait of Hormuz every single day, without exception. For decades, after Operation Epic Fury, traffic dropped 70% in 72 hours. 3,200 ships are now stranded, waiting at anchor in the Arabian Sea, the Red Sea, the Gulf of Oman, unable to move, full of oil the world needs. Brent crude hit $126 per barrel, the highest price since 2022. Lloyd's of London, which doesn't raise rates on speculation, suspended standard coverage for vessels attempting Hormuz transit. That's not a warning. That is a closed door with a price tag on it. Now the timeline, because this is where it becomes impossible to miss. The 28th of February 2026, US and Israel launch Operation Epic Fury. Within hours, IRGC broadcasts on VHF radio to every vessel in the strait. Navigation is forbidden till further notice, March 2nd. IRGC senior advisor Ebrahim Jabari makes it official on Iranian state media. The strait is sealed. Should anyone attempt to traverse it, the heroes of the Revolutionary Guard will set those vessels ablaze. That is not a warning. That is a doctrine statement. March 4th, IRGC claims complete control. 8 vessels already damaged. The Malta-flagged Safin Prestige struck. Crew evacuated at sea. March 5th, Iran announces an exception. The strait is closed, but only to ships from the United States, Israel, and their Western allies. Read that again. Not closed, selectively closed. That distinction changes everything. March 6th, a tugboat sent to rescue the Safin Prestige is hit by 2 missiles. It sinks. 3 crew members missing. March 13th, Turkey negotiates passage. 2 Indian gas carriers cross. A Saudi tanker carrying 1 million barrels bound for India is cleared. March 17th, United States drops GBU 7.2 bunker busters on hardened Iranian missile launch sites along the Hormuz coastline. CENTCOM confirms the strike. Iranian anti-ship cruise missiles in these sites posed a risk to international shipping. The sites were destroyed. The blockade continues. Stay with me. Because what Iran built here isn't a military operation. It's a checkpoint. And the checkpoint has rules that only Tehran controls. Here's the layer most coverage is completely missing. While Western tankers are burning, China is getting its oil. Since February 28th, Iran has allowed approximately 1.5 million barrels of oil per day to flow to China uninterrupted. That is 11.7 million barrels that have reached Beijing since the war began. While the Strait of Hormuz is officially closed to the west, China imports 45% of its total oil supply through this strait. Can Iran afford to block China? Can Beijing afford to lose 45% of its energy imports? Can Xi allow his economy to slow while simultaneously trying to negotiate with Trump in Beijing on March 31st? He cannot, and Iran knows that, which is why China gets a corridor and the West gets a blockade. That is not a military decision. That is a geopolitical price tag. In my view, this is the single most important development in the entire Iran war. Not the bombs, not Khamenei's death, the checkpoint. Because a checkpoint that selectively grants passage to China and denies it to America is not a military tactic. It is a statement about the new global order. And every government in the world is reading that statement right now. Before we go further, drop a comment right now. Do you think Iran's selective blockade benefits China more than it hurts America? And if this analysis cuts through the noise, hit that like button. It helps this channel reach the people who need to understand what's actually happening. Now let's talk about what this costs you directly, because this isn't just about ships and oil fields. Here's what $126 per barrel means in your life. GasBuddy analysts project U.S. gasoline prices rising to $4.20 to $4.50 per gallon if the blockade holds through April. That's not a projection. That's already happening at pumps across the Gulf states and the West Coast, and that's before the second order effects. Every product that moves by truck in America moves on diesel fuel. Groceries, medicine, construction materials, Amazon deliveries. All of it gets more expensive when the diesel that moves it costs more. The Federal Reserve is now facing a choice no central bank wants to face. Raise interest rates to fight inflation caused by an oil shock they cannot control. Or hold rates and watch consumer prices spiral through the summer. That is not a geopolitical scenario. That is the kitchen table conversation happening in American homes right now as you watch this. Now, here's what the analysts aren't asking. In my view, the most dangerous development is not the price of oil. It's the new Ayatollah. Mojtaba Khamenei, Ali Khamenei's son, was appointed supreme leader after his father was killed on February 28th. He has already vowed publicly to keep the Strait of Hormuz blocked. The Iranian parliament went further. They declared that the strait will not not return to its pre-war status. Not after a ceasefire. Not after negotiations. Never. That word, never, has never been used about Hormuz before. Not in 1979. Not in the tanker wars of the 1980s. Not in any confrontation in between. Iran has always used the threat of closing Hormuz. Now, for the first time, a supreme leader is using the reality of closing it as a permanent geopolitical instrument. That is not escalation. That is a new doctrine. And the United States is still trying to respond to it with a playbook written for the old one. Stay with me, because the final piece of this, the one Washington is not talking about publicly, changes the entire picture. Here's what nobody is saying out loud. The United States asked its NATO allies to join the escort operation. France said no. Germany said no. The UK has not committed. Trump announced on March 18th that America will go it alone, escorting commercial vessels through the strait without allied support. Can the U.S. Navy safely escort civilian tankers through a strait lined with Iranian missiles, drones, and mines alone? Can American destroyers intercept simultaneous drone swarms from multiple directions while protecting a slow-moving supertanker carrying 2 million barrels of crude? Can CENTCOM sustain that operation for weeks or months, with 2 carrier strike groups already operating at high tempo since February? Those are the questions the admirals are answering right now, and the silence from Brussels and London tells you more about the answer than any press conference will. In my view, the NATO refusal is the most consequential single diplomatic moment since February 28th, not because of what it says about Hormuz, because of what it says about the alliance itself. Trump went to war in the Middle East without NATO coordination. Now he needs NATO for the aftermath, and NATO said no. That gap between American military action and allied follow-through is exactly the gap that Iran, China, and Russia are all studying right now. This is where we are on the 19th of March 2026. Right now, as you watch this, 3,200 ships are waiting at anchor. Brent crude is above $120. Chinese tankers are crossing the strait daily. American bunker busters destroyed the launch sites. New missiles are already being repositioned. The new supreme leader has said never. NATO has said no. And the White House said we'll go alone. Watch oil prices Monday morning. Watch whether a second NATO country breaks from the alliance position and joins the escort. Watch whether China's negotiations with Iran produce a formal safe passage agreement. That would be the first official deal between Beijing and Tehran since the war began. Watch Mojtaba Khamenei's first major statement after the bunker buster strikes. Watch if Trump raises Hormuz in Beijing on March 31st. Those 5 signals will tell you where this goes next. Because the strait has never been formally closed in its entire modern history, until now, and the country that decides when it reopens and for whom controls something more powerful than any weapon in the region. They control the price of everything. This is not a story about a shipping lane. This is a story about the moment the global energy order stopped being neutral. The Strait of Hormuz was always a choke point. Now it is a checkpoint. And the difference between those two words is the difference between a world where commerce flows by geography and a world where commerce flows by permission. Iran just issued the first permit to China and denied it to everyone else. That isn't a military escalation. That is a redrawing of the world. In the next video, we're going to break down exactly how China is using the Hormuz crisis as leverage in Beijing and why the Strait's new checkpoint system gives Xi Jinping something to offer Trump that no trade deal or agricultural commitment ever could. If you want to understand that before it happens, subscribe now, because what gets decided in Beijing on March 31st will determine whether this checkpoint becomes permanent. Drop a comment. Do you think the Strait of Hormuz will ever fully reopen for Western ships? And hit like if this gave you something the news didn't. Stay with me.